Using technology to promote cognitive development. Piaget and Vygotsky believe that people use physical, mental, and social experiences to construct personal conceptions, schemes, of what the world is like. Engagement with the environment and with others in the environment are critical to cognitive development. Although there are numerous opportunities throughout the course of each day to watch what other people do, try out ideas, and interact with others face to face, we are normally limited to the physical and social stimuli that make up our immediate environment. Factors such as distance, time, and cost keep us from wider ranging interactions. Technology, however, has expanded the range of our experience. This is especially true with the advent of what has been called Web 2 technologies, which include interactive information sharing, collaboration, multi-user virtual environments, social networking, blogs, and the like. The use of technology in both elementary and secondary schools continues to increase. Although classrooms will likely remain for some time to come, the primary place where students and teachers gather in person, technology allows students and teachers to engage people and information across time and space. So the classroom is no longer the only environment for learning. There are now numerous virtual environments that can be accessed through technology. Technology applied to Piaget. Central to Piaget's ideas of cognitive development is cognitive disequilibrium, when a student's understanding of the world does not match her or his experience. Situations that present problems for students to ponder and try to solve drive learning and development because they introduce disequilibrium. Technology gives students access to experiences that contribute to disequilibrium. Microworlds, for example, are simulated by learning environments that provide opportunities for students to think about problems for which there are not obvious solutions, or situations that do not immediately make sense. They also allow researchers to investigate how learners make decisions in contexts that can be more or less controlled. The conservation of area and its measurement is a micro world that provides a set of geometric tools to encourage students to create different ways to represent the concept of area measurement. A group of high school students created 11 ways to represent the measurement of area using Carmi. Another micro world, Probability Explorer, allows students to design probability experiments that relate to such real-world activities as weather forecasting. It is intended to help students refine their intuitive understanding of chance. As these examples illustrate, microworlds foster cognitive development by encouraging student exploration, student control, and visual representation of abstract ideas. Some microworlds include sensors that are attached to a microcomputer to generate graphs of such physical phenomena as temperature, sound, motion, and electromotive force. Because such microworlds, also called microcomputer-based laboratories, provide an immediate link between a hands-on, concrete experience and a symbolic representation of that experience, a graph, their use may facilitate the shift from concrete to formal operational thinking. Opportunities to construct new understandings and conceptions, or schemes, come not only from interacting with information and objects in an environment, but from interacting with the people in that environment. Virtual learning allows students to engage environments and collaborate with people not otherwise accessible. Technology applied to Vygotsky. As you'll recall, Vygotsky believed that children gain significantly from the knowledge and conceptual tools handed down to them by those who are more intellectually advanced. Roy Pia and Gavriel Salmon were among the first to suggest that technology might play the same role as more capable tutors with such tasks as writing an essay and reading a book. Basically, the software provides prompts and expert guidance during reading and writing tasks. These supports or scaffolds are gradually faded as students become more competent at regulating their own behavior. According to some researchers, such support is vital in writing because young children often lack the cognitive resources and skills to move beyond simple knowledge telling in their compositions. Solomon, who helped develop both the Reading Partner and Writing Partner software tools, found that they improved children's reading comprehension, essay writing, effort, and awareness of useful self-quotation or self-questioning strategies. Some studies of the same period did not always report such positive results. However, as educators and researchers have gained experience with technology-based learning environments, Vygotsky's ideas have become better understood in that context and therefore more effectively applied. For example, Yelland and Masters found that within technological environments, children can support each other's learning, and the scaffolding that occurs in such environments supports learners cognitively, effectively, and technologically. Indeed, within the context of technology-driven learning environments, the technology itself, if it is designed to be supportive of the learner, is sometimes referred to as a scaffold. Even so, Vygotsky viewed social interaction as the primary cause of cognitive development. Technology connects people to people, and it can do so in a variety of contexts that allow learners to gain knowledge and the psychological tools that help them grow intellectually. One way in which technology connects people is in multi-user virtual environments. One such multi-user virtual environment is known as Quest Atlantis, a virtual learning environment that has engaged more than 20,000 students from 4 continents. The Quest Atlantis project will be examined in more detail in Chapter 10, and we will see how students engage in learning activities both online and in the virtual environment, and offline as well. The point here is that technology can support social interaction of many students in the same virtual environment. A second way technology connects people is through online mentoring relationships, typically called telementoring. The education and technology literature is filled with examples of telementoring in pre-K through 12 education. For instance, international weather projects such as the Kids as Global Scientists project and the Global Learning and Observations to Benefit the benefit the Environment program involve students in genuine scientific data collection and reporting. The collaborative relationships that students establish with peers and mentors create in students a strong sense of participation in what is called a community of practice. There are also telementoring opportunities for teachers. The website of the International Telementor Program provides volunteer mentors from around the world to teachers and students. Piaget, Kohlberg, and Gilligan, Moral Development. Piaget's analysis of the moral judgment of the child. Because he was intrigued by all aspects of children's thinking, Piaget became interested in moral development. He began his study of morality by observing how children played marbles. He first learned the game himself so that he would be able to understand the subtleties of the conception. Piaget discovered that interpretations of rules followed by participants in marble games changed with age. Age changes in interpretation of rules. 4 to 7-year-olds just learning the game seem to view rules as interesting examples of the social behavior of older children. They did not understand the rules but tried to go along with them. 7 to 10-year-olds regarded rules as sacred pronouncements handed down by other children or adults. Older children or adults. About the age of 11 or 12, children began to see rules as agreements reached by mutual consent. Piaget concluded that younger children see rules as absolute and external. Although children ranging from the age of 4 to about 10 do not question rules, they may frequently break them because they do not understand them completely. After the age of 11 or so, children become increasingly capable of grasping why rules are necessary. At that point, Piaget concluded, they tend to lose interest in adult-imposed regulations and take delight in formulating their own variations of rules to fit a particular situation. Piaget illustrated this point by describing how a group of 10 and 11-year-old boys prepared for a snowball fight. They divided themselves into teams, elected officers, decided on rules to govern the distances from which the snowballs could be thrown, and agreed on a system of punishments for those who violated the rules. Although they spent a substantial amount of playtime engaging in such preliminary discussions, they seemed to thoroughly enjoy their newly discovered ability to make up rules to supplant those that previously had been imposed on them by their elders. Moral realism versus moral relativism. The way children of different ages responded to rules so intrigued Piaget that he decided to use the interview method to obtain more systematic information about moral development. He made up pairs of stories and asked children of different ages to discuss them. Here's a typical pair of stories. A. There was a little boy called Julian. His father had gone out, and Julian thought it would be fun to play with father's ink pot. First he played with the pen, and then he made a little blot on the tablecloth. B. A little boy who was called Augustus once noticed that his father's ink pot was empty. One day that his father was away, he thought of filling the ink pot so as to help his father, and so that he should find it full when he came home. But while he was opening the ink bottle, he made a big blot on the tablecloth. After reading these stories, Piaget asked, are these children equally guilty? Which of the two is naughtier, and why? As was the case with interpretations of rules, Piaget found that younger children reacted to these stories differently from older children. The younger children maintained that Augustus was guiltier than Julian because he had made a bigger ink blot on the tablecloth. They took no account of the fact that Julian was misbehaving and that Augustus was trying to help his father. Older children, however, were more likely to base their judgment of guilt on the intent of each child. Piaget referred to the moral thinking of children up to the age of 10 or so as the morality of constraint, but he also called it moral realism. The thinking of children 11 or older, Piaget called the morality of cooperation. He also occasionally used the term moral relativism. Piaget concluded that the two basic types of moral reasoning differ in several ways. We summarize these differences in Table 2.3. Given how interested psychologists have always been in cognitive development and its relationship to related processes, it is not surprising that Piaget's ideas inspired subsequent investigations into how children conceptualize issues of morality and social justice. Among the first to extend Piaget's ideas was Lawrence Kohlberg. Pause and reflect. Recall our definition of decentration in the earlier discussion of Piaget's theory. How do you think the young child's lack of decentration might affect her moral reasoning? Table 2.3, morality of constraint versus morality of cooperation. The morality of constraint, typical of 6-year-olds, holds single absolute moral perspective. Behavior is right or wrong. The morality of cooperation, typical of 12-year-olds, it is aware of different viewpoints regarding rules. 6-year-olds believe rules are unchangeable. 12-year-olds believe rules are flexible. Constraint, morality of constraint, sees determines extent of guilt by amount of damage. The morality of cooperation considers the wrongdoer's intentions when evaluating guilt. Constraint defines moral wrongness in terms of what is forbidden or punished. Cooperation defines moral wrongness in terms of violation of spirit of cooperation. Notice that these first four differences call attention to the tendency for children below the age of 10 or so to think of rules as sacred pronouncements handed down by external authority. Constraint believes punishment should stress atonement and does not need to fit the crime. Cooperation believes punishment should involve either restitution or suffering the same fate as one's victim. Constraint believes peer aggression should be punished by an external authority. Cooperation believes peer aggression should be punished by retaliatory behavior on the part of the victim. Constraint believes children should obey rules because they are established by those in authority. And cooperation believes children should obey rules because of mutual concerns for rights of others. Notice how these last three differences call attention to the tendency for children above the age of 10 or so to see rules as mutual agreements among equals. Beyond the age of 12, adolescents increasingly affirm that reciprocal reactions, or getting back, should be a response to good behavior, not bad behavior. Kohlberg's description of moral development. Just as James Marcia elaborated Erikson's concept of identity formation, Lawrence Kohlberg elaborated Piaget's ideas on moral thinking. Like Piaget, Kohlberg believed that moral reasoning proceeds through a fixed sequence of stages. In the early stages, children's understanding of moral issues is narrow, concrete, and self-centered. As their ability to understand the world in which they live increases, their judgments about what constitutes acceptable moral behavior becomes broader, more abstract, and based on the welfare of others. Kohlberg's use of moral dilemmas. Kohlberg's approach to the study of moral development was based on analyzing how individuals responded to a set of short stories that involved a moral dilemma. Here is the story that is most often mentioned in discussions of his work. In Europe, a woman was near death from cancer. One drug might save her, a form of radium that a druggist in the same town had recently discovered. The druggist was charging $2,000, 10 times what the drug cost him to make. The sick woman's husband, Heinz, went to everyone he knew to borrow the money, but he could only get together about half of what it cost. He told the druggist that his wife was dying and asked him to sell it cheaper or let him pay later, but the druggist said no. The husband got desperate and broke into the man's store to steal the drug for his wife. Should the husband have done that? Why? Kohlberg's 6 stages of moral reasoning. After analyzing the responses of 10 to 16-year-olds to this and similar moral dilemmas, Kohlberg, 1963, developed a description of 6 stages of moral reasoning. The outline presented in Table 2.4 is a composite summary of the sequence of moral development as described by Kohlberg at various times during the development of his theory. To help you better understand the thinking that is characteristic of each stage, the following list provides basic examples of responses to a dilemma, such as that faced by Heinz. For maximum clarity, only brief typical responses to the questions, "Why shouldn't you steal from a store?" are mentioned. Stage 1, punishment, obedience, orientation. You might get caught. The physical consequences of an action determine goodness or badness. Stage 2, instrumental relativist orientation. You shouldn't steal something from a store, and the store owner shouldn't steal things that belong to you. Obedience to law should involve an even exchange. Stage 4, good boy, nice girl orientation. Your parents will be proud of you if you are honest. The right action is the one that will impress others. Stage 4, law and order orientation. It is against the law, and if we don't obey laws, our whole society might fall apart. To maintain the social order, fixed rules must be obeyed. Stage 5, social contract orientation. Under certain circumstances, laws may have to be disregarded if a person's life depends on breaking a law, for instance. Rules should involve mutual agreements. The rights of the individual should be protected. Stage 6, universal ethical principle orientation. You need to weigh all the factors and then try to make the most appropriate decision in a given situation. Sometimes it would be morally wrong not to steal. Moral decisions should be based on consistent applications of self-chosen ethical principles. As you can see from Table 2.4 and the examples that follow, Kohlberg's views of what children understand to be the right or moral course of action follows the progression we outlined on the previous page. The end product of each stage is a more complete and stable understanding of moral values, or in Piagetian terms, a more advanced stage of cognitive equilibrium. These moral conceptions are initially external and concrete, doing what others want to avoid trouble and gain rewards, proceed to an acceptance and valuing of social rules as a way to satisfy one's interests, and end with the construction of abstract principles that may or may not conflict with social conventions. So, let's see here. Kohlberg's stages of moral reasoning. Level 1, pre-conventional morality, typical of children up to the age of 9, called pre-conventional because young children do not really understand the conventions or rules of a society. Stage 1, punishment, obedience, orientation. The physical consequences of an action determine goodness or badness. Those in authority have superior power and should be obeyed. Punishment should be avoided by staying out of trouble. Stage 2, instrumental relativist orientation. An action is judged to be right if it is instrumental in satisfying one's own needs or involves an even exchange. Obeying rules should bring some sort of benefit in return. Level 2, conventional morality, typical of 9 to 20-year-olds, called conventional since most 9 to 20-year-olds conform to the conventions of society because they are the rules of a society. Good boy, nice girl orientation, stage 3. The right action is one that would be carried out by someone whose behavior is likely to please or impress others. Stage 4, law and order orientation. To maintain the social order, fixed rules must be established and obeyed. It is essential to respect authority. Level 3, post-conventional morality. Usually reached only after the age of 20 and only by a small proportion of adults. Called post-conventional because the moral principles that underlie the conventions of a society are understood. Stage 5, social contract orientation. Rules needed to maintain the social order should be based not on blind obedience to authority but on mutual agreement. At the same time, the rights of the individual should be protected. Stage 6, universal ethical principle orientation. Moral decisions should be made in terms of self-chosen ethical principles. Once principles are chosen, they should be applied in consistent ways. In an article published in 1978, several years after Kohlberg had originally described the 6 stages, he described the last stage as an essentially theoretical ideal that is rarely encountered in real life. Criticisms and evaluations of Kohlberg's theory. Is Kohlberg's contention that moral reasoning proceeds through a fixed universal sequence of stages accurate? Not everyone thinks so. Larry Nucci, For example, notes that individuals may respond to moral dilemmas at higher or lower levels depending on the context. In other words, violating the rules of a game is viewed quite differently as a moral issue than is treating people unfairly, and that moral reasoning may vary from culture to culture. Carol Gilligan, whose position we will discuss in detail later, has proposed two somewhat different sequences that reflect differences in male and female socialization. Paul Witz criticizes Kohlberg's use of moral dilemmas on the grounds that they are too far removed from the kinds of everyday social interactions in which children and adolescents engage. He prefers instead the use of narrative stories, both fictional and real accounts of others, because they portray such basic moral values as honesty, compassion, fairness, and hard work in an understandable context. Here are two examples that support Witz's point that moral reasoning does not always follow Kohlberg's stages when more familiar social interactions are the focus. First, children of various ages, including preschoolers, and from various cultural groups and social classes, recognize that some behaviors are just wrong. An unprovoked attack on others, for example, is always considered to be a moral violation, even when there is no rule that prohibits such behavior. The second example is quite interesting and concerns a situation many of us have found ourselves in. What do you do when you see another person unknowingly drop money on the ground? Most 8-year-olds will say that you should tell the person, and they justify their behavior with some type of pre-conventional level 1 explanation. Most 16-year-olds will give the same response and cite some form of conventional level 2 justification. What then would you expect of a 13-year-old? If you said they would also give the same response and their justification would be a level 1 or level 2, you would be wrong. These early teens say it would be acceptable to keep the money because they didn't cause the person to lose it, and even if they weren't there to take it, the person would still be without the money. Another criticism concerns the type of moral issue that most interested Kohlberg. Kohlberg's theory deals primarily with what are called macromoral issues. These are broad social issues such as civil rights, free speech, the women's movement, and wilderness preservation. The focus is on how the behavior of individuals affects the structure of society and public policy. At this level, a moral person is one who attempts to influence laws and regulations because of a deeply held principle. Micromoral issues, on the other hand, concern personal interactions in everyday situations, examples of which include courtesy, not interrupting someone before that person has finished speaking, helpfulness, giving up your seat on a crowded bus or train to an elderly person, remembering significant events of family, friends and family, and being punctual for appointments. For micromoral issues, a moral person is one who is loyal, dedicated, and cares about particular people. The ongoing orientation to moral development and education. The caring orientation. Carol Gilligan and Nell Noddings are pioneering educational scholars. They charted a new course in thinking about moral development and moral education. Each, in her own way, asked if our views of how we develop our identity, of how we think and act in moral situations, and of how we see ourselves and our relationships to others are more descriptive of males than females. We look first at Gilligan's objections to Erickson's and Kohlberg's theories, and then at Nodding's care theory.